3-year period, what has actually happened to that simple act of taking a photograph? Today, if you actually go to Flickr and you look at a photograph someone's uploaded there, it's amazing the amount of information that's been collected without you even being involved. Right? It's usually auto-dated and time-stamped. Right? It's usually geolocated, that where you took it is recorded. The device or the camera that you used is known to Flickr, even though you never said anything. The environmental conditions, the filters used, the light, the focal length, things that you didn't even know you needed to know, are all stuck as part of this digital social object that you've just moved up. So that has meant that when things have gone from analog to digital, from a physical world of atoms to an electronic world of bits, there's a lot of information being gathered around there that can become valuable later without you really having to get involved. Now that's happening with voice as well, right? Because now you can take a conversation and make it just a digital file. It's bits. So then, what earthly use would having a conversation be? Isn't that big brotherly? Well, actually, it's quite valuable because you can translate it. Okay? Translating something because it's transcribable makes it more accessible to other people. So you get rid of a lot of the risks of miscommunication because someone can't understand your accent or the speed at which you're talking or whatever. You're able to share across cultures and across ages, across locations, more accurately, because you've taken an oral conversation that not everyone might understand and first transcribed it so that it's shareable in digital form, and then you've translated it, or you have a choice of. And in an open source world, the tools to transcribe and translate are getting cheaper and cheaper. Right now, to transcribe a voice message, and Sue was saying when she called me, she knew that her message would be transcribed, which I wasn't there to take it. But actually, it's much cheaper for me. I travel a lot. And if I kept having to ring back to get voicemail, I'd bankrupt myself. But if all I got is a text message for what she left as a voice message, then I don't need a pen to take down the number of what I have to call back and all the other gubbins I've got to do. Because I only have so many hands, and you don't keep a piece of paper, a pen, a phone, and whatever else you're doing and juggle. So if I can just look at visual voicemail, it simplifies my life. So these shouldn't be seen as technical gadgets. The movement from analog to digital, from atoms to bits, from the physical to the virtual, is actually going to help a lot of us do things which will come into the final context of part pollution. So you have to start thinking of the things we do in terms of image or speech or text as things that live in a completely different world today, because human beings are doing something that no previous generation has been able to do, which is to have searchable, persistent communication. That makes our lives completely different. Okay? Human primates distinguish themselves from other non-human primates, firstly by having an evolved linguistic capability, and an ability to talk to each other much more than creatures can. And we switched because we learned to do this in a persistent way. We began to write. So from the caveman drawings of the hieroglyphics all the way through to the creation of print 600 years ago, all the way through to the creation of the world's biggest copy machine, the internet, 30 years ago, and onto the web 20 years ago. We're in an environment where the things that we say, the things that we write, the things that we draw are not just recorded and archived, but they can be searched. Okay? You can get back to it later. And that's something no previous generation had the power to do, which means that the communications capability for people like us is vast, because we can shift time and shift place, which is what the web was meant to do. How many of you ever watch a TV program not at the time that it's shown? Okay. How many of you ever listen to a phone message not at the time that the person spoke? Okay. These are time shifting, and the cloud, as they call it, gives a chance to place shift, saying, I can listen to a message from Sue wherever I'm traveling. If she's left one and saying, look, are you still coming on Thursday? Looking forward to seeing you. These are the people, etc. Well, I was in San Francisco at the time. I got all that, but it didn't matter that I was, it was 4 o'clock in the morning over here. It didn't matter that I was 5,000 miles away, because things that used to be synchronous, that you had to be face-to-face, that had to be streamed live, are now asynchronous because you can afford to file it, move it around, and pick it up somewhere else. That's very valuable. All this has to be seen in the context of this amazing phrase, social networks, as if someone discovered a secret sauce a few years ago. Right? Actually, as coming from a telco, I can't understand why telcos didn't do something earlier. The first thing that any social network has is a directory. Okay? It doesn't matter whether you think of Facebook as your social network, or whether you think of Ning, or whether you think of LinkedIn, or for that matter, whether you think of Microsoft Outlook. Okay? One of the things that creates a community is a directory, because you've got to know who else is there. Otherwise, it's pretty hard. I mean, we were having some conversations just before I began about, Google Wave, and saying how hard it is to hold a conversation when you don't know anybody else. So if you can't invite people, how do you begin? Right? How are you going to play with something when there's no one else to play with? So something social relies on other people being there, and you have to discover who they are. So having a directory helps. The second thing that a social network does is to have some way of communicating between the people. Right? Modalities of communication, as technical people call it, but it's like saying in Facebook you recognize very quickly that they have chat, they have email, they even have the ability to send each other video messages. But it isn't much use having a directory if the people in the directory can't connect to each other. Okay? It's the opposite of having the only phone. Right? The first guy with a phone must have been a very lonely person. I mean, ooh, what is this thing? So the second thing that makes a social network up is the ability to have connections between each other to communicate. The third thing is that human beings are social. So we form relationships. Right? You can call them geographies, you can call them age groups, but you can call them birds of a feather, you can call them friends and family. We like classifying each other and belonging. So the ability to group is an integral part of a social network. But again, telcos have that. We have directories called London or Leicester, or directories called A to D, or directories called white pages and yellow pages and whatever other pages. We've always had the ability to classify. But what telcos didn't do, and for all people Microsoft discovered, and then Facebook were the only ones who really take it on after that, was that these social people in the directories, able to talk to each other in different ways and able to group, actually helped if you could form some way of scheduling. I'd like to meet you at. I am going to this place. I want to watch this event. Because the ability to schedule appointments is valuable. An aside, when you talk about grouping, there's no distinction in relationship saying, I have joined this company or my relationship is complicated. Okay? Because all you're doing is describing some facet of your relationship. So we've got 4 things that make up every social network: a directory, way of communicating, way of grouping, and some ability to schedule. And if you can wrap all this up in the most important thing, which is the newsfeed,